Hey everyone, I hope you are doing well. This is Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider. We have actually seen some real football at this point for 2017 with the Cincinnati Bengals, and it came with largely positive results. We're going to talk about that game against the Buccaneers in the preseason opener. The Bengals won 23-12. We'll talk about that on this episode. We'll also be previewing the upcoming game against the Chiefs, and we'll also be trying to getting to some of listener questions in the live chat room on YouTube, the comment thread at Cincy Jungle, and if you want to fire them at us, at Bengals OBI is our Twitter handle. We'll be checking that out, as will hopefully my guest co-host for the evening. He has graciously returned once again, even after I asked him to stay a little longer than he probably expected last time. Joe Goodberry, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'll stay as long as you need me, Anthony. I have a good time doing this with you.
Good. I'm glad. And you're at Joe Goodberry on Twitter, correct?
Very simple, very easy. Yep.
Okay. So fire those questions at us in the YouTube chat or in the other areas that I mentioned, and we will try and get to some of those throughout the show. So, Joe, the Bengals, as I mentioned at the onset there, they won 23-12 against the Buccaneers. There were a lot of good things to take from that game, I think, and there were a lot of there were some things that made you say, "Yep, that's preseason game number one," right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think on live watch, I was very pleased with the game overall. Not only did they win, and for whatever that's worth in preseason, I thought they ran the ball well. I thought they were efficient on offense until that last play in the red zone with Dalton, that interception. The pass rush was there, and not only just pass rush, but edge rushing with speed. That's something they've obviously lacked for so long. And then you get glimpses of guys that are going to play, and for the first time, really, William Jackson, Darqueze Dennard in a larger role and actually healthy now. Nick Vigil, Andrew Billings. Now that we mentioned the pass rushers, but I think Joe Mixon obviously looked really good in the couple plays he got. So overall, I think I was extremely happy with the game afterwards. I watching it a couple times over. Some flaws that I think we all expected started to show. So I'm very excited to see this offense. The one drive was clean. I want to see when defenses start to adjust. So game 2, game 3, when they make it a full half, I think that's when we'll get a better idea of how good this offense probably can be.
Yeah, and before we kind of dissect everything from this game, the Bengals came out of it relatively healthy, too, from what I understand. I think Cody Core had a little issue, but should be fine. I think Carl Lawson had maybe a little shoulder issue as well, but shouldn't miss too much time based on what I've heard from those injuries. So that was really about it, which was nice. No crushing season-ending type of things, and hopefully that continues through the preseason because the Bengals were a little snake bit on that front last year, and obviously that hurt them throughout 2016. So let's kind of start with two young corners and probably guys we will be seeing quite a bit of in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens because Adam Jones is going to be suspended. So Jackson and Dennard, William Jackson III, who didn't even play a preseason game snap last year, and Dennard, who's been on the team for a handful of years now and has kind of had his ups and downs. What did you think of their play from what you saw? I actually think I liked a bit more from what I saw from Jackson over Dennard. I saw Dennard maybe get pushed around early by Mike Evans. Maybe I was wrong on that. What do you think about how those two played?
No, I think they both overall played really well. Dennard, he got beat on that deep ball by Evans. That's really not where I think he's going to look his best. Long speed, ball skills, not really where he's going to excel. It's directly in comparison to William Jackson too. But Mike Evans is a big, strong guy, one of the top 5 receivers in the NFL. Dennard has to win that hand battle, and he didn't. And a little shove like that can look much worse when you're going against a big receiver like Evans. So I don't knock him too much for that. William Jackson, on the other hand, 40 snaps, 3 targets in his area, only allowed 1 reception, I believe, for 3 yards, had a nice tackle in the open field versus Doug Martin. I thought William Jackson looked very good. And the best part is they both were the starters, the boundary guys, until they went into nickel. And then Pac-Man actually came in, which was surprising to me because if you're going to play a veteran, usually you play him and get him out of there. They brought Pac-Man in late in the drive, put him on the boundary, and Dennard kicked inside into the nickel spot, into the slot spot, And apparently they carried over into practice this week too. I saw some reporters say that Shaw stayed at safety and backed up Iloka when Iloka returned, and Denard's still acting as the third corner as the nickel guy. So it's good to see. I mean, it was 4 years ago. It's about time to play them. So here we are, and it looks like these young guys may get a chance to play a lot. And I really want to see which one of them gets to start for Pac-Man in week 1. So it should be a good battle.
So, Joe, one of the takeaways I had from this first game, yes, there are concerns in certain units, and some of those concerns did show up on film in this game. But the big question is, or was really this offseason, especially after you kind of saw some glaring roster holes last year in that 6-win season, the question of this once lauded depth that this team had from 2011 through 2015. Obviously, they lost a lot of guys, both to injury and free agency over the past, year or two. I was kind of impressed with the depth once again on this team. Again, there were a lot of young guys that may have made a couple of mistakes, but the one drive you have Andy Dalton throwing to AJ Green and Brandon LaFell and Tyler Eifert. The next drive you have AJ McCarron making back-to-back completions to good-looking young second-year receivers in Tyler Boyd and Cody Core. I don't know. I was kind of impressed once again with the depth. Were you?
Yeah, definitely. And I was surprised. I didn't expect to feel that way. And I agree. They probably had the deepest roster for a long time, from 11 to, 13, 14, 15 in that range. When you don't play the draft classes the way they haven't the last 2 years, those guys become kind of forgotten. And then they get a chance to play in preseason, and you go, yeah, those guys are good. Why aren't they playing again? And I think we all question it. And the depth is there. I think they really only have the one big issue right now. That I thought last year at receiver, they lacked the speed and depth because guys got hurt. On the defensive line, they lacked the depth and the finesse pass rushers from the edge. So they went out and attacked both of those in the draft. And in free agency, I think with Chris Smith trading a draft pick for them. So those weaknesses may be strengths now. And definitely, I think a good player could get cut and claimed onto another team from those spots. Yes, I think their depth has really shown itself in the first week. And if guys stay healthy, this should be a very, very tough cut this year. And especially going from 90 to 53. In other years, you got to cut down a little bit here and there. Now it's going to be one big chunk of cuts, 40 guys just off the roster. And I think we'll get a few surprise names.
Yeah, you might get some surprise names and some other names that just they're talented, but there's just not room for them on this roster. Again, this is the Orange and Black Insider. I'm Anthony Gazenza. We're talking with Joe Goodberry, talking about the Bengals' victory over the Buccaneers in the preseason opener. And Joe, just so you know, little side note here. In our live YouTube chat, Shells Heavy says at Joe Goodberry, absolute must follow on Twitter. So you got some fans.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
And I wholeheartedly agree. Obviously, you provide a lot of insight and not just draft insight, which is obviously excellent, but a lot of stuff with the Bengals and other NFL teams. So if you aren't following Joe Goodberry, please do that. So I think you kind of alluded to it. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? The offensive line. And I saw aspects from certain players that have been really under the microscope, Russell Bodine, Cedric Ogbuehi. I saw some things that made me optimistic, and I saw some things that made me just kind of shake my head, where, especially for a guy like Bodine, who's now in his the fourth year, and these are things that just can't you can't expect that from your starting center. But if you did, I mean, Jeremy Hill was hitting holes hard, and really the only bad runs he had were on missed blocks. But there was a lot of space opened up in the middle of the field for him. Joe Mixon obviously had a couple of nice runs. So mixed reviews. What kind of grade would you give the offensive line in their performance against the Buccaneers?
It's definitely, I would say, a passing grade. I don't know if I don't feel great still. It's a C. It's maybe a C minus, C plus. And that's all you really need, because as long as they don't drown or sink the team, this offense can be really good. I thought Trey Hopkins at right guard, and it sounds like he's the guy because he's still starting in practice since that game. I thought he nailed almost every single play. And if that's the case, it may not be a big drop off from Ziegler. And I know Ziegler's a great player, and they shouldn't have let him go. I still feel that way. But when I thought of the prospects of Andre Smith playing in that spot after not really staying healthy, not really having a good year in a handful of years now, I was nervous. And seeing Hopkins play that way gave me the most hope on the offensive line. He may be their second best offensive lineman right now, and that's behind Clint Bowling. And if that's the case, then maybe you can count on the guards this year. I thought Fisher was okay. I thought for what they asked of their tackles, which was almost the bare minimum, they were getting the ball out 1.5, 2 seconds at most.
Yep.
They said, just block the inside. You can get beat on the edge. We'll get the ball out before they even touch the quarterback. So they didn't ask him to do much, but he was better than Oboye was. He did his job for almost every play. There's a couple where he could have done a little bit better, but again, we get to Bodine and year 4, and he's still the same guy he's always been. He's still going to get blown into the backfield once or twice every few drives. And the only time they lost yards was 2 tackles behind the line. One, he just can't handle the center on a reach block. The next time he gets blown into the backfield by, and I meant defensive tackle earlier, but he gets blown into the backfield by the nose tackle and Mixon gets dumped. So they can't continuously happen like that. And then you see on a few loops and stunts, there's miscommunication and the guys are slow to react. That falls on the center a lot of times. We may not know exactly what the case is, but a lot of times that finger will be pointed at the center for that. And then you get to Oboye, which is really the biggest question. We know Bodine isn't good. They found ways to scheme around him. Your left tackle can't be schemed around. You can hide him, you can quick pass it, but as we saw, you get to the end there, and what happened? The defense was sitting on those short routes. They were sitting on the quick speed out, and Hargraves makes a great play. I think Dalton made a little bit poor of a decision there. You got Eifert and Green in the slot versus safeties running corner routes. I want that. I want that ball thrown up to them. Either way, it was thrown, and the corner's sitting on it, and he's waiting on it, and he's going to jump that. I think we're going to see more of that if they can't get 5-step, 7-step drops involved into this offense. So it'll be interesting to see. Oboye, he's got to be able to – he's not going to defend the power. He's never been that guy. He's going to get bull rushed. He's always had a soft core and late hands, and I think he can't anchor well. So when they told him to guard the inside, let your outside shoulder go, he didn't look comfortable. His kick step was slow. It wasn't wide enough. He wasn't getting deep enough in his drops. And Noah Spence, the second-year good pass rusher for the Bucs, was beating him to the corner every time. And just with a little bit of power was turning Oboye's shoulders. If that ball's not out in 1.5 seconds, that's a hit on the quarterback every time. And that was scary. So I think on review, I got more nervous with Oboye than I even was last year because he said, and they've tried to sell it as left tackle is his natural spot. I don't think it is. He got benched at left tackle in college after giving up 7 sacks in 9 games. He doesn't look comfortable over there either. I think his days are numbered at left tackle. If he continues to play like that. Now, it was 1 game. It was 6 drives or so I think they got with the first team, maybe 5. So we may be jumping the gun. But what we saw last year in 13 games wasn't pretty at all. And I think the combination of Bodine and Oboye can kill a lot of plays on your offense. And I don't think you can have that. Maybe one guy. And I don't know who the answer is if you got to bench one of those guys. But as of right now, those 2 gave me really big concerns for the offensive line. But on the bright side, I think right guard may be solved. You got an undrafted guy in his 3rd year who's always played well when he's gotten a chance in Trey Hopkins. In every preseason, I thought he's played well. And here he is getting his full chance and as a 25-year-old finally ready to go. That's exciting.
Yeah, that poor guy, he's been bounced in and off and around all kinds of iterations of the Bengals roster. He's been on the practice squad. He's been on injured reserve. He's been on the final roster at times. So good to see him.
They played him at left tackle, right guard, left guard. They given him snaps at center. They tried to find a spot for him, and it just so happens they let 2 of their best offensive linemen go, and Andre Smith's not ready for right guard. Oh, I guess Hopkins gets his chance. That's how the Bengals operate, right? They don't let guys just crack the starting lineup, and he found a way to do it.
Yep, and kind of staying on the offensive line here, there was a question in the YouTube chat, and I'm going to add to it a little bit. It's from Jack Burton in our live YouTube chat. Thanks for the question here, Jack. Do you think the Bengals will be looking to pick up a tackle after the final cutdown? And to kind of add on that, maybe do they already have a tackle in Andre Smith if they want to really, if you still see these issues with Oboye on the left side, maybe it's Fisher that goes to the left side, right. Smith on the right. You have Hopkins at guard. What do you kind of think about that? Or do you think they might really make a waiver wire claim? Maybe they look at Brandon Albert. Right. What do you think?
Yeah, that's possible. I think if anything, it'd probably be after week 1, and then the veteran contract isn't guaranteed. So I think at least we go into week 1, and if it's a Brandon Albert or Nick Mangold, let's say, and they switch position from there from someone else, I think Fisher would probably be the next guy up at left tackle. Reading some tea leaves from earlier in camp, I thought it was because Fisher was struggling that they were giving him backup left tackle reps and Andre Smith backup right tackle reps. And I thought, okay, maybe Andre's struggling at right guard, maybe Fisher's struggling at right tackle. These guys may be backups. They're trying to figure out what they're doing. Seeing the way he played, I don't think they are oblivious to the fact that he isn't ready or may never be ready. I think the way they are quick passing and come out like that, they know exactly what he is. So if they're looking towards the future and saying it might be Fisher at left tackle, you get Andre Smith at right tackle, Hopkins at right guard, I think that's an upgrade already. If Andre can play, we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him in 2 years, really. We haven't seen him in almost 3 years because he was hurt that last year for the Bengals. So if he can play, I do think they could make a claim there, or sign a guy like they did. They had interest in Nick Mangold if he was interested in backing up or playing guard. Apparently he wasn't. That's what I gathered. So maybe they get to the point where they go, we can't have 2 holes on the offensive line. Bodine's got to sit or somebody's got to move, or Bodine goes to guard and you move. Hopkins played left tackle last year in preseason, and he's only 6'4", but his arm length is like a 6'7" offensive lineman. He can do it. He played left tackle in Texas for 3 years. Maybe he's your guy, but it all seems like un-Bengal-like moves. I think they go with Oboye for the extended future. And I'm talking 8 games. And if he doesn't cut it, then I think they scramble. And it depends on where they're at in the season. If they're 4-4, maybe they start moving things around and get desperate. If they're 6-2 and still have found a way to do it, I'm thinking of the Giants last year, had a high-powered offense, and Eric Flowers is a disaster at left tackle, but they find a way to get around it. If that's the case and the Bengals offense is still moving despite the holes on the offensive line, they probably just ride it out and see if he develops and progresses.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just how I think we mentioned this on this show before, just how short of a leash the offensive line will have with Marvin Lewis in a contract year. So much turnover in terms of players leaving and new faces on the line. It's going to be interesting. And this team, while some people think they may be mediocre this year, a lot of people think they can be a double-digit win type of team with the talent they have. And if it's the offensive line, a couple of guys holding them back from that, it's going to be interesting to see just how long of a leash Marvin Lewis gives his offensive line. He's a guy, as we know, that has been sticking with quite a few of veterans, maybe a little longer than he should or than people deserve. So you've got a couple people just commenting on the offensive line in the YouTube chat. They look good because it seems as if Dalton was hitting his first read. I think if he had to look for a play, the line would have fallen apart. That's from Michael Myers. Justin Tabor says he was throwing to his first reads, but nobody was near him. Clean pockets. Not like he was barely getting those throws away. So, but that's kind of the design, right?
It is. And I think that's going to be the offense. I think they're going to spread it out with your weapons. If you want to hide your offensive line, you want to limit the pass rushers. So you only want 4 coming if you can dictate it to the defense. You want to make the coverage clear so that the ball can come out quick. You don't have to actually look at it too long at post snap. So what they're going to do, and what I think they do and can do because of the weapons they have, and you can split out Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard and Tyler Eifert, and you can go empty. And they did it a couple times in the first game. I thought the third down play, and there was 2 plays back to back. One to Eifert was a little hot hitch route. I believe it was 2nd and 12 after they lost on some yardage on first down. 3rd and 6, I believe they sent Hill out wide left, and they hit LaFell on a slant versus a linebacker. And that's the type of coverage you're going to get when you can spread it out and put guys in motion. It's going to make the defense declare if it's man or zone. It's also going to give you easy matchups like LaFell versus a linebacker or a slot guy versus a safety because of this. And if Dalton can pick out the best matchup pre-snap or read the coverage pre-snap, that ball is going to come out really quick. He's done it for his whole career. The offense is really based on that. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that that's what we see, a quick passing, quick strike offense that when they got to run the ball, I do believe they can because of the three backs and because they looked good running in that first week. I thought guard and center, when they were run blocking, they all did their jobs. So I think Mixon makes a big difference. I think a healthy Gio makes a big difference rather than a Hill carrying 250 times again. So the offense can be successful despite the offensive line, but I do think we see a little bit different of an offense.
Yeah, and their first 2 picks in this year's draft were guys that, even though Mixon's a running back, they are yards after the catch kind of guys.
Yep.
You saw Mixon have even though it was an 11-yard catch, he broke about 3 or 4 tackles on the play, which was, kind of his forte. Let's talk about the rookies, and this will kind of bleed into, because I also want to talk about the pass rush. It looked pretty good. Only 2 sacks on the night, which isn't terrible, but for the amount of pressures they had, it seemed like they may have had more, but a lot of hits on the quarterback that I believe 2 or 3 at least caused incompletions and near interceptions. Jordan Willis was, in my opinion, he played outstanding. Now, granted, this is against, he was in there early against, when Winston, I think, was still in the game. He got in there a little bit. But most of his stuff came against, the 2s and the 3s, but he played outstanding in terms of this rookie class. Mixon had limited touches, but obviously had a couple of nice runs in that good catch there. We didn't see John Ross. They rested him.
Malone caught a touchdown.
Malone caught a touchdown. Carl Lawson was in on some plays as well. Yep. Obviously, you and I both have been pretty high on this draft class when the Bengals got all of these names here. How do you think the rookies did in their first our first look at them playing some real football?
About as well as I think we could have expected. Mixon in his 5 touches, 2 really, really good plays. Like you said, the check down where he was, it's kind of a play action. He leaks out of the backfield, makes 3 guys miss. I think 10 out of those 11 yards were after the catch. He wasn't downfield. So
right.
You want to see that. I mean, our running backs haven't made anybody miss in 3 years, it feels like. And then on the one run, it was a stretch to the right. Great. He's patient, lets the linebacker overrun, and then he bursts up the middle.
Yep.
That patience, that vision, and then the burst to get fully up speed, and he barely gets tripped up because I think he was going to split those safeties or run somebody over, and he can do that at his size with his speed combo too. I think that just that little run there was everything I saw on tape, and it goes, he can make a poor offensive line look good because he has that ability. It was almost a Le'Veon Bell type of run with that patience and then the burst. So Mixon, thumbs up. And on the interception too, he's got to prove that he can pick up the pass protection if he's going to play. And he picks up his guy, and there was still a pick. So overall bad play for the offense, but he did his job. So overall thumbs up for Mixon. I think you obviously without Ross, that changes things because we have high expectations for him for what he can change for the offense, but we'll see him hopefully this next week, if not the week after. I thought Lawson was really good off the edge. He was a right defensive end in the first team unit in nickel. So that's fun because it shows they understand what he is and what he can provide right now. And I think just his burst off the edge, even if he's not a veteran, even if he doesn't have everything down right now, his electricity off the edge is going to cause pressure, and it's going to help Dunlap and Atkins. There was one 3rd down, I believe. He comes ripping off the edge. He didn't get pressure on Winston. He didn't turn the corner well enough, but Winston bailed the pocket and stepped up and got away. I think he hit the tight end and they converted. But still, it shows that just that flash to a quarterback is going to put him in his mind. And then Willis, I thought Willis was very good. That 1 sack he had, I watched it maybe 4 or 5 times to see if he was offsides. He wasn't. He just had a fantastic jump, and he gets around the corner with 1 arm. He rips the quarterback down. And then there were some more impressive plays where one was a screen pass. He beats his man upfield, and then the screen's behind him. He turns around, whips around, and tackles the running back about 4 yards downfield. I want to see that hustle with a guy that's that much of an athlete. That shows he's working, and that shows he's going to work. And when you get that combination, you got to be excited. And then Malone runs a post, gets a touchdown. It's really all he really had that night, but shows he can maybe play. I think he was the player of the game for the scrimmage game they had a couple weeks ago. I'm thinking he's the inactive guy on game days through the season, but if Core continues to sustain injuries, he was injured in OTAs at the end. He gets injured in the first preseason game. Who knows? I mean, maybe Malone's the guy up and Core's inactive. So I think it might come down to special teams. So I want to see how those guys play that spot if you want to be active on Sundays. Elliott, he made his kick when he had a chance. So he's got to prove he can be the guy because he missed 3 in practice today. So I think that'll be an interesting battle. But overall for the class, I'm happy with that. They just got to play. We've seen draft classes look good in preseason or on tape, or really be excited after the draft before the season starts, and then you don't see these guys for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 8 weeks. We can't have that happen again. Hopefully there's shorter releases. Hopefully Marvin Lewis is willing to play these young guys. He says it every time. He says, I should have played Nick Vigil earlier. Yeah, you probably should have, and we don't get to see him until week 17. So we got to hope that's not the case again.
Yeah, and just a little side note with the Elliott note on his kicking. Obviously, he made his kick, and I think he also made an extra point, which was good to see, especially given all of the issues last year that the Bengals had at that position. And ironically, the guy that everybody wanted the year before as their kicker, Roberto Aguayo, was cut right after the game against the Bengals. He unfortunately fortunately for the Bengals since they won the game, but unfortunately for the young man in his career, he was cut right after that game after missing a field goal and I believe an extra point.
It's just strange. Yep. He was so good.
Yeah, he was an excellent college kicker, and just struggled. One other guy, and I was going to mention this, but I'm going to give props to, I believe it was Super Soul in the YouTube chat, Ryan Glasgow. One of my least favorite picks in this year's class in terms of, you had all that flash, I guess, with those first handful of picks, and the high potential with him, and he just kind of was a guy that to me was, rotational defensive tackle. He might be groomed into someone they lean on in the next couple of years. He had, I think, 3 or 4 pressures on the night, and
3 pressures, and one was really nice. He threw that center down and hit the quarterback, and just that flash there for a guy that they said probably won't be a great pass rusher. You get 3 pressures in your first game and a couple of run stops where he held up on the against the second, third team line, but still, you got to do your job, whoever's in front of you. But just those flashes, especially that one play, was super nice. And you kind of forget about him because they have so much depth at defensive tackle. You kind of wonder what's his role, especially this year. But if he can do that and continue to do that, they'll have to find a way to get him on the field.
Yeah, and he was apparently, and I really like Pro Football Focus. I don't know if I necessarily love them because I think there are some flaws in the metrics, but I think they are very. It is very telling what they put together a lot of times, and he was one of their favorite guys, I guess, coming into the draft, and then he was one of the best performers, I guess, of the week, in terms of snaps played and productivity when he was out there. So that was good to see.
And we shouldn't forget Jordan Evans. I thought he was all over the field. That's an athlete at linebacker, and then all of a sudden he's thumping and he's hitting and he's playing the run. I mean, coming from a conference that's just wide open and you're just playing with speed all the time, he looked good. And I was actually like, well, he's making the team, and that's a guy I bet Simmons is loving to get on special teams with that size and speed. I thought he had a great game. First game, really good. So I'd like to see him get some more snaps, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the upside's very high for that young man, and he, I think he got a personal foul penalty that I thought was a little questionable at best.
It was terrible.
Yeah. I when I saw that, I was like, oh, really?
If I'm a coach, I'm like, I don't even care. Go do that again.
Right. Well, before we move on to talking about the upcoming game number 2 against the Chiefs, and again, this is the Orange and Black Insider. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're talking with Joe Goodberry. So just kind of going through the opening win against the Buccaneers here. The Bengals played pretty well. We're kind of dissecting the game. We talked a little bit about Willis and Lawson. The one guy, especially after the draft, that's been forgotten is Chris Smith. And, he was a trade, a conditional draft pick, a guy that didn't really do all that much with the Jaguars, but he is a different build than many of the other defensive ends that the team employs. And I thought he was outstanding against Tampa Bay. He just seemed to be everywhere. Now, again, against 2s and 3s and whatnot, but a guy that really flew around and made plays. That is a very crowded position group. I know a lot of people, probably including yourself, Joe, have some qualms with Michael Johnson, and as he gets up there in age. They invested in Willis. They've got Will Clark. So, I mean, there are guys there, but should some of those guys be on notice, especially with a performance like Chris Smith's, Jordan Willis, all of those younger guys that seem to have a little bit more speed off the edge?
Yeah, I think they definitely should be on notice. And don't forget Wallace Gilberry. He's a guy who didn't make the Bengals last year. Signs on with the Lions, is cut, I think, week 8 or 9, sits on the street for 3 or 4 weeks and joins the Bengals for the last few weeks. If you cut him, I don't think he gets picked up. I think a performance like Chris Smith, and he kicked the Bengals' ass last year in preseason. I think he had 2 sacks and a bunch of hits in the one game they played. That must have been on their radar. They must have been waiting for him to get on the trading block or possibly cut to jump on him, to give up a conditional pick for him, and a team that doesn't normally give up picks for players. So that means they liked him. He's had some experience at linebacker too with the Jags, with their kind of hybrid 3-4-4-3 defense. I wonder if they see that as a guy that can maybe back up another position and save you a roster spot, because it looks like they may have to keep 3 quarterbacks. They may have to keep 4 running backs, 4 tight ends, 7 receivers. You start to run out of spots, and you need guys to be able to double up and play multiple positions. Smith and Lawson obviously fit that. I think when you look at Gilberry, you look at Will Clark, you look at Michael Johnson, you might say there's only room for one of those guys. Veteran, and if it's me, I probably just keep Michael Johnson. Even though Clark's younger, I don't think Clark, this is 4th year now, he just hasn't developed as much as you would like overall. He's got some speed, he's got some strength, he's got some decent size. Isn't all there. He's got the ingredients, but the meal kind of sucks. So, it might be time just to cut him and let him go and see if he can find other work. You go with Michael Johnson. I'm excited for the idea of Michael Johnson possibly kicking inside in nickel. While I think he's done as an edge rusher completely, he can provide maybe a little bit as a run defender, and then maybe getting some passing lanes if he's lined up inside in nickel. And again, maybe he's a guy you can mix some exotic blitzes with and do some things with him, Lawson and Smith, that maybe you couldn't do before, or maybe you can get a little more dynamic with it. But overall, I think these snaps got to go to the young guys. I think Willis needs those snaps that Michael Johnson normally gets. Johnson had 900 snaps last year. If he gets over 350, I think we should be rioting in front of the stadium, because, yeah, I mean, when you draft Willis as high as you do, you draft Lawson and he shows up as well as he has in camp and preseason, both those guys, and then Chris Smith also, you got to say, listen, the young guys can play in the NFL, and they do more than ever now. I feel like it doesn't take 2-3 years. These guys can make plays as rookies. So I hope we see Smith get some more snaps with the earlier unit on defense, just to see. If it's not there, fine. If he's just a preseason warrior that beats up third stringers, fine. No skin off your back. I don't even think they lose a draft pick if he doesn't make the team. So
right.
That works. But if he can produce and if he can play, and if he can provide pressures, that's valuable. And it's more than what you got in the backups that may be veterans on your team right now.
Yeah, and this is both, the entire defensive line is kind of an odd conglomeration of players. You've got kind of your true big ends in Michael Johnson, Carlos Dunlap, and then you've got a lot of hybrid guys. The Marcus Hardisons, a guy that played an edge position in a 3-man defensive front in college.
I think they messed that pick up now that we're into this year, and he's been hurt, yeah. But I always think about Grady Jarrett and how good Jarrett's been for the Falcons. And now Hardison's playing defensive end exclusively again, and I'm throwing my hands up there and saying it's probably done for him.
Yeah, but still an intriguing guy. I mean, there's a lot to like there. I mean, you've got Deshaun Williams, a little bit of on the smaller side for defensive tackle, a guy they like. They've got the giant guy, Tupo. The big guy from Colorado that was an undrafted.
And he had a nice play too on the goal line. Almost they had a safety. He chewed that center up, man, and threw him into the backfield. So I want to see more from him too. He's probably a guy they try to hide and get on the practice squad with just the depth they have at defensive tackle.
Right. And, I think versatility and guys that, you mentioned Michael Johnson maybe being a guy who kicks inside on nickel formations. Wallace Gilberry was a guy who did that for a number of years for them. Keeping guys like that to go deeper at other positions is probably going to be the way. And unfortunately, you're probably going to see, as we said at the beginning of this show, you're probably going to see some guys that pain you that they'll get rid of. And, hopefully that's not the case, but it is what it is. I lied though, Joe. I said that was the last thing I wanted to talk about before we transition to the Chiefs, but you just had to mention quarterback. And I don't know what to make of the Jeff Driscoll thing. I thought he looked he played much better than I would have anticipated him playing.
Yeah.
However, almost every single pass, if not every single pass, was a rollout, a bootleg, get him out of the pocket. And, how sustainable is that in today's NFL? Probably not very. Made a great run on the touchdown. Juke two guys out of their jocks, which was hilarious. For me, I had no idea why they kept this guy last year on the final roster when you have an healthy AJ McCarron behind Dalton. He kind of proved why now a little bit in this first preseason game. Does this solidify that they're probably going to keep 3 again with him being one of them?
I think if he continues to play like that or close to it, that's a high bar to continue that. But yeah, they kept him last year. Apparently they had a 3rd-round grade on him. So when he was cut, they were like, it's a no-brainer. Got to pick this guy up. From what I've read, the Cowboys had him rated higher than Dak Prescott by their scouts. But yeah, so a lot of teams liked him and liked his potential, but they wanted to stash him for 2 years or so. The Bengals have the luxury of doing that because they have at least for now, for another year, maybe 2 years. So yeah, I think you keep him if they're that as excited about his future. Apparently, he's been really good in camp. He had a very efficient scrimmage game, inter-scrimmage game, and then a good first preseason game. If it continues, yeah, you got to keep 3. And it kind of pains me because they have depth at so many other positions. You're never going to see that 3rd quarterback. But if you ever want McCarron traded, they need to have trust in whoever that next guy is. And for a lot of us that want that value, want that draft pick for McCarron, which I think a large portion of the fan base wants them to strike while the iron's hot, and they may have passed on it already, but they still have opportunities. That Driscoll needs to be good, and he needs to show the coaching staff he can handle a game or a half. I think what he is right now, and like you said, with the rollouts and the simplified reads and handing the ball off, that can get you through a half. It might get you through a game. Probably not 6 games. The defense is going to catch up. The offense is going to really simplify it by that point. From what we've seen right now, so maybe he can do more. And if they really think he's a developmental guy, maybe we're talking next year or the year after that he really needs to see time. If that's the case, yeah. It seems like this is a long, slow cooking that they're doing with Jeff Driscoll, and it seems like he's ahead of what they expected right now. So I think he's definitely on the roster as of now.
Okay. And we had a question for you asking, I think it was Mr. Sinister with a C in the live YouTube chat, asking you your thoughts on Andrew Billings in his first time out on, again, taking, like William Jackson, taking his first actual NFL snaps last Friday night.
Yeah, and Billings could have been a first-round pick, at least maybe a high second-round pick. Teams apparently knew about the knee injury. I don't know if the Bengals did or not, but obviously they got him out of there pretty quick in training camp last year and had the surgery done on his knee. So it was refreshing to see him play, and knowing the upside and potential he possesses. There are a few really standout plays in that game. And one, he really demolished the guard and held a double team on another play. I think they got him on a couple trap blocks, a couple wham blocks, got him moving one way, and he couldn't redirect. He's a big guy, big, bowling ball at 6 foot and 330 pounds. That guy's not going to really be the most agile. But at Baylor, he showed some pass rush and he showed some agility. So I'm interested to see what he can become. I definitely think he was rusty, but he flashed his upside. And I think even a guy like that's going to make some mistakes, but make some splash plays, is an upgrade over what Domata Peckle was the last few years at nose tackle, because the last couple of years there, while they love Peckle for his brain, it didn't matter if you're in the right gap in the right lane and taking on the right guy if that guy is pushing you out of the spot. So give me a guy that's going to make a few plays here and make a couple mistakes. He's only probably going to play on rundowns. I don't see him as a pass rusher and nickel. but he may provide a more of a pass rush in your base defense that I think they've lacked inside, especially with Peko playing that position. So first game in, hopeful, saw some ups and downs, but I think it's to be expected. And let's use the excuse of he hasn't played in a year, and that'll make everyone feel better.
Yeah, even though Mr. Sinister didn't ask me my opinion on Billings, I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Really, just quickly, the two things that stood out to me were his, and it's to be expected, his immense strength and inexperience. Against the pro game, I saw him, like you say, he literally tossed around. He took on a double team, I saw, and I think he allowed someone else to get kind of some penetration there.
Yeah.
And then he tossed around a couple of interior offensive linemen, like you mentioned. And then you saw the play with Ryan Fitzpatrick on his touchdown run where he was just way out of position. Kind of got, as you alluded to, caught moving one way and couldn't redirect. And so, I mean, a couple of those things stood out to me. Obviously, if you remember him coming out in the draft, legendary strength in the state of Texas. I think he was holding either state records or school records, whatever, in a lot of different weightlifting categories. So we know he is a brute of a guy. Overall grade, before we move on, Joe, of the team's performance?
B+ overall. I think the only negative was the offense couldn't be more dynamic because of, I think they were playing and hiding the offensive line.
Yep. And we'll talk about that in our next segment here about some other things we'll be looking for in the team's second game against the Chiefs. Again, this is the Orange and Black Insider. I'm Anthony Cosenza, joined by my guest co-host for the this week, Joe Goodberry. If you are new to this show, welcome. We have a number of live viewers and greatly appreciate that. We've got a lot of questions. We're still going to try not only to get to some as we continue to talk here, but towards the end of the show, we're going to try and get to some listener questions. So send those our way in the live YouTube chat, on Cincy Jungle's comment thread, or on Twitter to either at Joe Goodberry or at Bengals OBI. We appreciate it. You can get this show if you are unable to join us live. You can get this show on iTunes, on SoundCloud. All of our material is on cincyjungle.com, so check that out. You can also get our stuff on YouTube, and then, like I said, follow us on Twitter, email us, all of that. We are happy to hear from you, and we are happy to have our live listeners join us. So, Joe, it's known that the third preseason game is more kind of the quote-unquote dress rehearsal where you see a lot of the starters, but you're probably going to be seeing more of them this next game against the Chiefs. And, whether that's an entire quarter, whether that's a couple series, a quarter and a half, whatever the case may be, we'll probably be seeing a bit more of the starting units to get them their football legs, their game legs under them a little bit. What do you think the goals, some of the goals should be for the Bengals in this week's game? Obviously, Scott and I talked about it last week, and obviously staying healthy is an obvious goal. I don't think we need to I don't think we need to go into that one. But based on what you saw last, give me maybe two goals you think Marvin Lewis should be preaching to his team this week, either based on who might be playing, what you saw last week in the opener, and what the team should be focusing on as they continue to progress throughout the preseason.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line. Like you say, injuries are always number one. Health is always paramount. But you kind of have to figure out if the offensive line can hold up a little bit longer. So I don't want to get Dalton hurt, though. So what do? You probably do what you do last week, and you keep that offensive line out there for the entire half. And if that means you do some longer pass sets or longer plays with McCarron in there and not necessarily Dalton, once Dalton's out of there, that's probably on the docket, I think. You got to figure out if they can hold up for 5-step, 7-step drops, more than 2.5 seconds. The Bengals offense is relying on the deep ball. And now it's normally coming off of play action with max protection up front. That's fine as if you can get those off, but you have to sustain that part of your offense despite the offensive line. So I think for them, even with Dalton in there, if you can get one shot off or maybe a couple deeper routes, deeper developing plays. That would build a lot of confidence, I think, for the team, because I think they know what the offensive line is right now. For me, I'd like to see Gio play. I'd like to see John Ross play. Again, this extends from health. Do you want to get those guys hurt? You don't really, but you expect some live action at some point for those guys. Iloka practiced 2 days in a row. I don't want to see him play. I think we know exactly what George Iloka is, and I'd rather just save him for maybe a few snaps week 3 and then be done with it. So for me, I would love to see John Ross get out there and see how fast he is, see if he's ready, because you read some season previews from other national writers. I think it was Andy Benoit recently wrote that he doesn't expect Ross to play much and just maybe be a decoy, be the fourth receiver, because they really like LaFell because he's a cool guy, basically. I can't believe it. I just don't believe that. I think when he practiced the other day for the first time in team drills, he was out there with the ones. He only did about 10 or 12 snaps, but it was with the ones the entire time, did not go with the twos. I think he will be used, and I think he's going to be a big part of this offense. I want to see it. I don't want to rush him, but I'm excited if that's week 2. He was dressed last week, even though he wasn't cleared. I could see him going out there for a few snaps. So defensively, give me more Jackson, give me more Denard, figure out who that guy is for week 1 and for the future, because it's not just week 1. Someone's going to get hurt down the line, and you got to find a way to rotate these guys in. I'd like to see more Nick Vigil with the starting unit, and I think he is a starter, but I thought he played very well the first week. So if you add an athlete that's a solid tackler and going to be all over the field to this defense, sounds good to me. So he caught my eye a bunch the first week. I'm going to focus on him a little bit more week 2.
Royal Flush 513 in the live YouTube chat says the defense should do better against a less talented Chiefs offense. I'm assuming that means less talented than perhaps the Buccaneers offense.
Maybe at receiver.
Right. I'd be shocked if they regressed in defense. Obviously, offensively, I'd like to see the Chiefs overload blitz on said side. This will give us a better idea of what said can do in game situations. And I think guys that'll be coming off of that side, I think Justin Houston is more of a left end, and Tamba Hali plays more the right side. They've got D Ford that they mix in there as well. So, I mean, they've got some good pass rushers, and it's not just Said Abwehi that's going to be on notice this week. It's going to be Fisher. It's going to be those interior linemen. So while the Bengals might have a little bit more of a break from Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, guys like that at the wide receiver spots, because the Chiefs got rid of Macklin and kind of have this weird amalgam of players they put together at the wideout spot, they can still get after the passer and do that well. Obviously, I think what we would like to see would be for the offensive line to play well. Real quickly, my goal. One goal for me is, and I mentioned this on the program last week, that what I wanted to see in this preseason opener, and it didn't really totally come to fruition. I wanted to see the Bengals take advantage of opportunities for points, and take every advantage of that. Obviously, the first drive, methodical, looked good, pick in the end zone from the 2-yard line. You can't have that. Now, preseason week 1. Probably not a big deal. We all know Andy Dalton's been very efficient in the red zone, and that is an extreme rarity from him. But that costs you at least 3 points there. Then, they didn't really move the ball all that well under A.J. McCarron. They did a few nice things, but they had to kick 2 long field goals at some point. So I just want to see them be better in the red zone offense, be more methodical, and get maximize every opportunity they have to get points, because that was something that really, really killed them last year. Would you agree, Joe?
For sure. Yeah, and then they couldn't make the kicks last year, so it was even more devastating to this offense. Red zone is huge. I'm inclined to believe with Green and Eifert being healthy, they'll figure it out and they'll be all right. I think they had a touchdown probably on the play they threw the pick, because you watch the play again and Eifert's one-on-one with a safety running to the corner. Throw it up. And you look on the other side, Green's got the same coverage. Throw it up. I mean, I think they do, and they usually do on that play. That's a play they run very often in the red zone.
Yeah,
I can think of Green scoring against Ravens and the Jets. Same play. So they'll get to it. And I hope that wasn't really a microcosm of what's going through Dalton's head. Maybe he's rushing a little bit because of the line. Just hearing the other day in practice how the defense was killing them and they couldn't get plays off. And there's one play after a couple sacks where Dalton just puts his hands up in front of his face to shield himself from the pressure.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we can't let that get to him. He's already not the best when it comes with dealing with pressure. Don't let this offensive line destroy the entire offense by, putting that thought in your quarterback, and he starts to force it a little bit more and a little bit more turnovers. I think this defense will be good. We got a vanilla look that first week, but I think we're going to see a little bit more mixing it up, a little more blitzes. I expect a top 12 unit on defense. I really do, especially if the pass rush stays for what we saw in the preseason. And if it does, this offense may not have to be the most explosive and dynamic, even though I expect them to be. They might just have to take care of the ball for the most part.
Yeah, and you saw a difference between Andy Dalton 2015 and Andy Dalton 2016. Now, granted, Dalton took care of the ball still pretty well last year, especially given all the injuries to important players and all of that on offense. Yeah. But you saw the happy feet at times. And while he was sacked a lot more than he was the year prior, you did see him obviously get happy feet in the right situations when pressure was coming. But I remember a couple times too where there was happy feet when there wasn't really pressure coming at that point.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's just the subtle movements of just sliding a little bit off your mark and making an adjusted throw from there. And that's where he really doesn't, do so well. He can break the pocket. He can sometimes run. He can make a cool play and underhand it to Gio, and Gio makes a play. He can do that. It's the subtle things of just moving a little bit or throwing with a guy near your legs or a guy that's touching you and still making a nice throw. You don't have to be Big Ben, but there are some subtle movements that you wish he had in his arsenal.
We're talking Bengals preseason football. We are previewing the Chiefs game. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're with Joe Goodberry. Joe, you got somebody in the YouTube chat, M. Shaw. Retweet me sometimes, Joe. So I don't know. He didn't leave a Twitter handle, but if you get someone that looks like an M. Shaw and you like their tweet, they're asking you to retweet him.
Tell him to leave his handle. It's weird, and this is kind of a little bit of a humble brag, but since I got verified like 6 months ago, I don't see every tweet anymore. And then Twitter came out with that where they're kind of filtering tweets that are offensive, or if you don't have a profile picture, or if you're new to Twitter. And I don't see everyone's tweets anymore. Sometimes I'll go to people that are friends of mine. I go to their page and they were talking to me and I didn't respond because I don't see them.
Well, there you go, M. Shaw. Joe's not big leaguing you. He may just not be getting he just may not be getting them. But Joe is very interactive on Twitter from what I've seen. And with me, we've interacted quite a bit. So, keep firing them at him. And maybe he'll start retweeting you once in a while. Continuing on with the Chiefs, Joe. Obviously, offensive line seems to be one big area of improvement. Any others that you think from preseason week 1 to preseason week 2, an area or a positional unit that needs some improving this week?
I mean, I think overall, defense get their hands on the ball a little bit more. If there's a way to, I think last year, maybe the last 2 years, they really dropped a lot of interceptable balls. I can think of early in the year versus the Broncos, versus the Jets, George Iloka dropping some, Vincent Ray dropping some. I want to see some capitalization on those opportunities because, like we said, I think this defense could be a top unit. The sacks haven't always been there. The turnovers haven't always been there. They didn't get one. I think it was Demetrius Cox, the backup safety in the fourth quarter, on a kind of an errant throw up the seam, which was a great play. But I want to see someone who's probably going to make a play. It'd be awesome if it was William Jackson. I know he's got great ball skills. I want to see him get tested. More deep balls. Throw a couple towards Denard because I just want to see how he reacts and how he plays with it. So, I kind of want to see that defense tested a little bit. I was surprised that the Bucs didn't want to show off Deshaun Jackson, their new acquisition, and especially against Denard. You got him one-on-one, throw it up or let him run by him. So I kind of want to see some of that from the first team defense.
I agree, and I think you do want to see that maturity from Jackson and Denard just because especially in that game one, they're going to be high up on the depth chart, and you want to see that maturity. You want to see, and especially from Jackson, a guy who just missed all of last year, and I don't want to say he's playing catch up, but a guy that is, you want to see him out there making plays and living up to the first round potential. Obviously, the Bengals have a lot of talent in the secondary based on high round draft picks, that sort of thing. So I agree with you. And, when you mentioned Vinny Ray dropping interceptions, I always think back to the Pittsburgh Steelers wild card game. He had one. Yeah.
Speaking of dropped interceptions in wild card games, Chris Crocker versus the Texans.
Another fabulous one.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, and that's something that obviously was you hope isn't a carryover from 2016, that 6-win season, to 2017. It's when you're not a good team and you're not playing all that well, obviously you're just missing out on these opportunities. I mentioned the maximizing opportunities to get points, whether it's hitting the field goals, hitting a freaking extra point after you get a touchdown. You got to take advantage of that. And that really, I mean, if you go through the 2016 schedule and you see the Bengals scores, especially towards the middle portion where they were losing quite a few games, had the tie, that sort of thing, we're talking minimal points. And, a point here or there, and all of a sudden that's an 8-9 win team instead of a potential 6-win team. So that's got to be.
And I think it was only maybe 21 or 23 points from Nugent on missed opportunities, but the fact that they wouldn't kick anything over maybe 43 yards, you probably rob them of another 20 points. So I think that's something they could probably get with Elliott and Bullock. I'd like to see more long kicks. They got a couple opportunities with the Bucs. If they do have some failures, let's see some 50-yarders. Today in practice, they did only over 45-yard kicks. That's what I want to see. Do it. I want to see if this offense can rely on a kicker, not just for the easy stuff, because Nugent was missing that. They couldn't even test him when their offense failed at the 40-35 range. And that's going to happen. We play the Ravens, and Justin Tucker can single-handedly beat you because he's making 50-yard field goals. I'm not saying we got to have Justin Tucker. It'd be nice, but let's find out if these kickers can be relied upon.
Totally agree. And the other facet to that is that the Bengals play in a division and on their own home turf, where as autumn and winter come, the weather gets very terrible, and you got to have a somewhat, if not very reliable kicker to be able to kick in wind, snow, rain, crappy conditions. Heinz Field is a disaster to kick in. I think that's a well-known fact among NFL circles. So they need a guy to be able to kick in a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different conditions. It's just a must, especially after what we saw last year with Mike Nugent. Now, good segue into maybe some of the rookies that we're really going to be, or young guys, maybe guys that haven't been on the field that much. Obviously now, Jake Elliott, you mentioned he missed 3 field goal opportunities in practice, on deep opportunities on Wednesday. He's a guy you want to keep an eye on. Who else do you think that we should be really keeping an eye on, either based on what they did last week or maybe based on what they didn't do last week, and they may need to kind of get in gear here?
Without beating the offensive line to death, I would like to see because I still think they lean towards the veterans. And if Pat Sims or Brandon Thompson can make this roster, or if they do, are they worth the spot over a Deshaun Williams or a Marcus Hardison if they're still concerning him at defensive tackle? I think a lot of veterans are on the bubble this year, more than normal. So I think overall, is Eric Winston worth keeping anymore at tackle? To be honest, I thought Tyler Kroft played really well and showed he can play from the up back position. I wonder how secure Ryan Hewitt is on the team, and if he's good enough to be just a fullback in a sense, and a special teams guy. I know they really like him, but you kind of have to wonder if and save roster spots. If Uzama's healthy, which he isn't right now, but they expect him to be by regular season, Kroft, and if Kroft continues to play well, it's a guy they really liked, and he's finally healthy again. could Hewitt possibly be on the bubble? I want to see him get more snaps at tight end. Can you move him around? Is he a guy that can add a little bit more than just being a fullback? Because if you look at it, Gio and Mixon don't really run that well behind a fullback. If you're just keeping them for Jeremy Hill, and for special teams, I do get and I appreciate, you kind of have to wonder. And then another veteran, Cedric Pierman. He's just now healthy, but at what point do you cut ties there? I know he's a special teams captain, a guy that has made the Pro Bowl before. I think Trey Carson looked really good in that first game. He showed he can pass protect. He showed he can catch. He showed some speed with some power on that frame. At what point do you say a third running back? And I'm only saying third because I still wonder how long-term Hill is in the plans. If a running back goes down elsewhere, could you trade Hill for a pick? Trey Carson looks like your typical guy that's on the back end of a roster that gets some playing time and finds the way to succeed. The guy, one of those guys that would be on the Steelers and beat us in week 17 just because that's how it works. Do you keep him and cut a Cedric Pierman? So for me, a lot of veterans at the back end of that roster should notice and need to have big performances.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in seeing, in terms of young players, I'm kind of interested in seeing J.J. Dielman. I want to see him kind of get some playing time. And, we know offensive linemen can kind of get overlooked in terms of film. And at least the first time when you actually watch a live play, sometimes you can't see everything that necessarily plays out up front. But a guy that, they grabbed Westerman last year.
And Westerman had a good game week one. We didn't get a chance to talk about him, but I thought for a guy who's kind of doesn't get mentioned at all, I didn't even know what his place was. He's probably on the bubble only because they like guys like Redmond. They draft Dielman. You got to think if they keep 8 linemen, maybe 9, Westerman's in that last 1 or 2 guys that probably makes it. But then Bowling comes out as the only really good veteran on the offensive line. They plug Westerman in, and I thought he was really good and efficient with those guys. There were a lot of runs up the middle where he got his guy down and moved, and he's a fighter. There's a couple plays he lost, but recovers and throws the defensive tackle down. I'd like to see that. So for a guy that kind of got a little bit forgotten, I thought Westerman really showed up.
A lot of upside there, and potential guys that could play multiple spots on the line. Dielman may do a little center, may do a little guard. Same thing with Westerman, maybe a little center, different guard positions, that sort of thing. So I think those are some young guys to kind of watch up front. Obviously, you've got your Ross and your Mixon. Ross, we don't know for sure if he's going to suit up quite yet for this week, but he has been going pretty much full go in practice, even though he's not. You mentioned he had some limited snaps with the ones and that sort of thing. But, the Bengals are taking the reins off of him a little bit from his offseason shoulder surgery. Linemen. I'm really interested to see if they can still generate those same type of pressures that they did last week. The trio of Lawson, Willis, and Glasgow up front really did a good job of getting into the backfield, hassling the quarterback, and it made a difference. Obviously, they couldn't really get too many things going, get a lot of points on the board. So those are kind of obviously some of the rookies. We want to watch all of them, obviously, but those are some of the rookies I'll probably be keeping an eye on, especially from what we saw last week from some of those guys. We're going to be taking some more questions here for just another couple minutes. We've got some. We'll get to them. But if you have some, leave them in the YouTube chat. Leave them on our Twitter accounts at Joe Goodberry or at Bengals OBI or in the comment thread at Cincy Jungle. What are you looking for, listeners? What are you looking for in the Chiefs game, the Bengals going into preseason week 2? What are you most excited about? What are you most concerned about? And who would you like to see really step up in week 2 in the preseason? We'd like to hear from you. You can also get this program if you're unable to join us live. As I mentioned earlier, you can get this program on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, or at Cincy Jungle. You can always be in touch with the program on Twitter at Bengals OBI or via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and we are with a special guest co-host, Joe Goodberry. Thanks for joining us, Joe. It's been awesome. We've got a couple of questions I've seen so far. We'll try and get out of here soon, though. One of which was earlier in the show, and it was talking about, and unfortunately this is kind of a narrative, and it's what you get with this player, but it was about Vontaze Burfict and some reckless behavior we've seen throughout practice and training camp and that sort of thing, and the possible potential carrying over of a lot of that stuff into the regular season. Obviously, he was there were times last year he was a little bit better about it, given his suspension and other things going on. There's still the way he tackles sometimes risks concussions and injuries and all of that. Now he seems to be in better shape than he has been in previous camps.
That's big.
It is big. It is big because there are times when you've seen him get winded at times in the game. You don't want to see him get winded. But are you still concerned about this guy? Are you still concerned? I love the edge. I love the nastiness. It's something that I think the Steelers always bring, and it's something that the Bengals need to either emulate or whatever. But at the same time, he's got a reputation now. Referees target him. I don't know.
I think that's the key, is that he does have a reputation and he will be targeted and negatively affect the team. I love the passion. I love the physical play. Yeah, it's tough to defend him sometimes when he twists an ankle at the bottom of a pile or steps on a running back at the goal line. But a Tiger doesn't change its stripes. He was the same guy in college. These are the concerns teams had. Vontaze Burfict is who he is. And he's right now, he could end up with a contract extension before the season starts. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's tough to pay him sometimes because of those things. You see him push the running backs coach Kyle Kasky after he runs in and hits Gio a little bit too low on a thump drill where he ends up tackling Gio lower than he should have, like a guy coming back from an ACL injury. I don't know. It's tough to defend him sometimes. I think that's what the most stress for guys like you and I that have to answer questions and try and defend your team at the same time, to have a guy like this, because he's so good when he's on. He's super good. And when now he's healthy, I expect a huge year from him, but he just has to control himself a little bit.
Yeah, in terms of a non-edge rushing type of linebacker in the NFL, not a Von Miller, not the guys on the Chiefs, that sort of thing. In terms of kind of the more traditional set linebacker, I think when he's healthy and he's on, he's probably a top 5, at the very least top 10 type of player like that in the league. There are times where people where they're not Bengals fans and they ask you, like, dude, what's this guy's deal? And you kind of just it is who he is. I mean, it's just, you're right. In Arizona, I remember watching because I get a lot of Pac-12 games out where I live, so I remember watching a lot of him at Arizona State. I vividly remember personal foul penalties from college that late hit out of bounds, and he's gotten better about it. You want him to change a bit because you don't want stupid things like that to cost your team games. But at the same time, he plays such a vicious and, a position in a sport that is based on physicality. He plays a position that you want that kind of mentality in a way. You want him to make hard hits. You want him to wrap up and tackle. You want him to do these things. You don't want him to injure people. You don't want him to do, the ankle twisting and stuff like that you mentioned, Joe. But I don't think I'm any more concerned about it than I am any other year. But I think, like you said, it kind of just comes with the territory, right?
Yeah, for sure. You just hope he can keep it clean because the defense feeds off him. The whole team, I think, feeds off him. Just don't, that playoff game still sticks in my mind.
Yep. I think it sticks in a lot of people's mind. We've mentioned that twice already, and we're kind of just like, oh,
yeah,
we can't talk about this.
We like to bum each other out a little bit.
I know. There's one other thing I want to get to before we get out of here, because we're running a little long here, Joe, and I appreciate your time and spending an entire program yet again with me. And hello to my usual co-host, Scott Schulte. He was hopefully going to be here tonight, but I think he had a date with his young son to a baseball game. So he's having a little fun there. But there's some talk. We were talking about young guys we want to see in the next preseason game. A lot of which was some of which that was mentioned in the YouTube chat was Alex Erickson returning punts.
Yeah,
people want to see more of that. Obvious because of what he did last year in the preseason, cementing his role with the team. However, I don't know if you noticed the depth chart that came out before preseason game number 1. You saw some interesting names that weren't too far down below the depth chart on kickoff returns and punt returns. There's John Ross. There's Joe Mixon. Now, there's a lot of – I want to get your opinion on this. There's a lot of talk about not using some of your best or most exciting type of high draft pick players, that sort of thing, on the return game or on, aspects that may get them hurt that isn't necessarily their primary role with the team. Well, you look at John Ross, he may be a number 3, number 4 type of receiver this year, at least early on. Joe Mixon may be taking a bit of a backseat to Jeremy Hill, at least early on. Yet, these are very exciting guys you want to get the football in their hands. Are you opposed, especially if they're taking back seats to certain players on offense, are you opposed to these guys getting kickoff return opportunities, punt return opportunities? The Bengals did it with a starting cornerback in Adam Jones because he was pretty good at it. He did rotate with Brandon Tate and stuff like that as well. But what are your thoughts? I look back, 2006, Reggie Bush with the Saints. They still let him do it. Number 2 overall pick. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Peterson did it his rookie year with the Vikings. So when you make possibly doing it, you look at the backups they have at those spots, and I think it was telling. You got Pac-Man at corner, and they're deep at corner. You've got Ross, and I believe they're deep at receiver. You've got Mixon, and they're deep at running back. They can afford if an injury happened. You don't want those guys to have injuries, obviously, but I think when you have premium talent and those guys are also really good return man, why put on John Ross's kick returns in college? Electric.
It's silly. It's silly. Yeah.
You don't get a hand on him, and he is gone. I mean, laser. Joe Mixon, same thing. He is. Obviously in the open field. He's dangerous. They've always used Gio there in practices and in camps too. And if you go back to his college days, he was a good punt returner. I think the depth is there. If you come down to it and it's keeping maybe Deshaun Williams versus Alex Erickson, let's say for that last spot, those guys can handle those duties. And maybe you mix it up and you split it up so that you're not putting too much of a burden or too many hits on those guys, and you survive. But I still like Erickson. I think he had a really good rookie year, especially after a really good preseason. I want to see and make sure he's still that guy. And if he returns one like he did last year in preseason, maybe you do still keep him and make that role for him. Because, Erickson still produces as a receiver too. So he was their leading receiver last week. In last preseason, I think he's a backup guy that the backup quarterbacks trust to be in the right spot and make plays. So he's not completely useless as anything other than a returner. So he's got value too.
To me, I look at it and I'm always about getting the football in your most exciting playmakers' hands, however you possibly can. Now, yes, there is risk and necessarily want to take when talking about a number 9 overall pick, talking about your second round pick that you're high on on both of them very much. I understand that you don't want to see them potentially get injured on a useless kickoff return that may not mean that much. But I mean, you look at it. I think between the two of them, you look at John Ross, four kickoff return touchdowns in his collegiate career. I think I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Joe Mixon had 2 in his career. So
and Brandon Wilson had one too. They're 7th or 6th.
Correct.
If he makes it, he's injured right now and may not cost the roster spot, but you have depth there.
I apologize. It was Mixon had 1. So, but you have 5 kickoff return touchdowns between these two guys. Now, it wasn't as if Erickson was a bad kickoff return man. He was pretty decent throughout the regular season. He led the NFL, I believe, in total kickoff yards and yards per kickoff return average, but there still wasn't the same electricity that we saw from him in that aspect in the preseason. Rules have changed in the NFL to limit injuries on kickoffs. The kickoff return man, keeping a guy that is strictly a kickoff returner has kind of been a little bit passe in the NFL just because of the rule changes. But, there are opportunities for guys to pop big returns. And to me, if you're talking about Joe Mixon, who may get 7 touches a game, just for the sake of argument, 7 touches in a game, you just can't find ways to get him on the field for some reason on offense. And, you have an opportunity or two where, you need a special team spark. Maybe you give them two tries on punt returns. Maybe they just end up in fair catches or what have you. But these are guys that are electric and with the football in their hands. I don't know. I'm kind of that mindset, even though it's a risk. I'm kind of that mindset that says, let these guys have the football and let them do their thing.
And then normally for punts, they have a safe guy. That was Brandon Tate forever. And they have Pac-Man, who won't fair catch it for the most part and is your big splash returner. I think once Erickson showed he can be that safe guy is why they moved on from Tate. I don't know who that is right now as punt returns. I guess Ross is new, for the most part at it. So he's going to have his struggles. He's probably the guy that replaces Pac-Man as the splash returner, in a year or two. If Mixon can be that safe guy back there, great. Maybe that's Gio. I don't know who it is if it's not Erickson. So I think that's where it may come down to, that's his roster spot just based on that. Cause I think that's very important. I more than anything, I think I can picture Marvin running down the sideline like, you got to catch that, or you can't let that bounce in the 5-yard line. I'm remembering Hard Knocks, and he's chewing one of the returners out for not fielding it inside the 5. Yeah. Or I believe he did field it inside the 5. But either way, if that's Erickson's value, I think Simmons has a lot of pull on this team. He's the one who replaced Marvin for the one game or the one practice while he was injured. So Erickson may have just value on that. So if someone else is out there catching fair punts in practice or in preseason games, that might be our first clue.
Yep. And Dustin Merritt in the YouTube chat says guys get hurt in non-contact drills and on coffee tables. Put the best players on the field. Sure. Can't worry about injuries. That is true. Joe, we've run a little long, so I think we're going to get out of here on those questions. I appreciate your time. Any final thoughts on anything before we get out of here?
No. I mean, I'm excited. I think this team can be good. I think it's a great case study for letting one unit be a bottom 5 unit. I'm talking about the offensive line and loading up the rest of the team, especially on offense with weapons. I mean, to the brim. The weapons are as good as any team, if not better than any team in the league.
Right.
And then you have a average or middling quarterback. Even though we love Andy Dalton, we like him. He's a great dude. We know what he is at quarterback. So how does this come together? How many points can they score? How dynamic can it be? Or how limited will it be to see how this plays out?
I am too. Just a couple final thoughts from me. I'm looking forward to seeing what some of these young guys do in this next game in the preseason. I think the Bengals have amassed a lot of young talent over the last couple of years, and maybe not even any more so than what they did just this last spring. I think they've done a good job of getting younger and faster, and hopefully we see more of that against the Chiefs. I don't want to stand on my soapbox too much, and I'm not going to go into a lot of political detail or anything, but I think a lot of people know what's going on in our country. I think there's a lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of hate going on. I just would encourage people, do something nice for somebody this week or this weekend. Hold a door open for a stranger. Tip your bartender nicely. Do something that really is something that is throwing out some positive vibes. I think a lot of people need that. I think the country needs that right now. So that's just my little 2 cents as we end the program.
We need football to start. If anything, it can unify us, especially as a fan base. When everyone's wearing the same colors, we kind of all forget that other stuff sometimes, for the most part.
That's right. And I think whatever side of the fence you're on, whatever, just try and be nice to some people going forward here. Yeah. I think a lot of people need that right now.
That's not politics.
Joe,
niceness is universal.
That's right. Joe, you were awesome. I appreciate you coming on. Whether Scott was with us or not, I would have had you on, but I appreciate you filling in for the entire show. I keep lying to you, man. I keep saying, oh, it'll be short. And you know what? Well, we get a lot of feedback in the chat, and you and I get talking about Bengals, get excited, so we go a little long. Yeah. But I appreciate the time, my friend. You are welcome on this program anytime you want. Open invitation.
Thank you.
I hope you had a good time. Just for you want to promote any aside from on Twitter, you got the blue check now at Joe Goodberry. So where else do you have a website? I mean, I know sometimes you contribute here and there to cincyjungle.com, but where else?
Yeah, and I have done Bleacher Report and things like that. With the new house we just moved into, I kind of had to turn down some offers this year, but I'm thinking about I've got a few projects that are coming along. One's a slow cooker that we probably won't see for a few months, but another one I want to do some streaming of game reviews on Mondays or Tuesdays after. Look for that. I'm trying to find the best service to do that, and I think it could be really cool until the NFL probably shuts it down. So look for that, and let's have fun for a few weeks until they get us.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely keep me updated on that, and I will be happy to promote that. And like I said, anytime you want to come on this show, man, you are more than welcome. You're awesome, and our listeners really enjoy you as well. Thanks for coming on. For Joe Goodberry, I'm Anthony Cosenza. That's going to do it for us. This has been the Orange and Black Insider. Check us out on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, cincyjungle.com, and get in touch with us via email and Twitter. We will see you next episode. Thanks, and enjoy preseason game number 2 with the Bengals facing the Chiefs.